Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Eleanor Whitmore was a woman the public believed had conquered life. As the founder and CEO of Whitmore Analytics, she commanded rooms filled with ministers, investors, and global innovators, her words shaping decisions that affected millions. At 39, she had built an empire powered by data and foresight, yet every evening she returned to a silent penthouse overlooking London, where success echoed louder than companionship. Her husband had died years earlier during complications at childbirth, leaving Eleanor widowed and emotionally sealed off from the world. Raising her daughter Lily alone taught her discipline, restraint, and self-control, but also taught her how to bury pain beneath productivity. She became efficient at living, not at feeling. Motherhood gave her purpose, but not intimacy. Eleanor had learned that love made people reckless, and recklessness destroyed systems. So she kept life controlled, measurable, predictable. Even charity was strategic. Yet beneath the polished exterior was a woman haunted by the quiet question of whether wealth and brilliance could replace human connection. She didn't know that the universe was already preparing an answer, one that would come from a place she had never thought to look. Nathaniel Brooks lived in a world that most people hurried past without acknowledgement. To the city, he was just another homeless man stationed near a supermarket, wrapped in layers of worn clothing, his possessions neatly arranged beside him. But beneath the scruffy beard and weathered face lived a mind that had once stood at the forefront of data science. Years earlier, Nathaniel had been celebrated for predictive models that anticipated market crashes and disease outbreaks with unnerving accuracy. His future had been limitless until it ended all at once. The plane crash that killed his wife and 2 sons didn't just erase his family. It erased his reason to exist. Nathaniel resigned from his job, liquidated his life, and vanished by choice. He believed survival was a punishment. Living on the streets became a form of penance, a way to feel the pain he believed he deserved. Yet even in exile, his mind never slept. He observed patterns, behaviors, inefficiencies. Intelligence was the one thing grief had not taken from him. On an ordinary afternoon, Eleanor stopped outside a supermarket after dismissing her driver, craving anonymity. As she walked toward the entrance, she overheard a calm, measured voice correcting a heated debate between 2 university students. The voice belonged to Nathaniel. He spoke with precision, dismantling flawed assumptions about data sampling and market bias. Eleanor paused, stunned. She recognized immediately that this was not street wisdom, it was elite intellect. When she approached him, curiosity replaced caution. Their conversation flowed effortlessly into deep technical territory. Nathaniel spoke without ego, without desperation, without asking who she was. When Eleanor asked why a man with such brilliance lived on the pavement, he simply replied that life had taken more than he could carry. The honesty struck her harder than any pitch deck ever had. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt something unscripted stir inside her, and before logic could stop her, she asked him the unthinkable, "Please marry me." The word startled them both. Eleanor didn't frame it as rescue or charity. She spoke plainly. She wanted a partner, stability for her daughter, and a man who understood depth beyond money. Nathaniel laughed softly, convinced it was a cruel experiment. He told her that people with power love grand gestures until they were tested. If she was serious, she would need to buy a ring and propose properly, on one knee, in public, without shame. Eleanor left without argument. She returned an hour later with a ring, knelt on concrete pavement as people gathered, and asked him again. Cameras appeared. Whispers spread. But Eleanor's focus never wavered. Nathaniel accepted, not because of the ring, but because she had humbled herself without calculation. In that moment, 2 lives shifted course permanently. Eleanor didn't take Nathaniel to a hotel. She took him home. The penthouse felt unreal to him, quiet, warm, orderly. She gave him food, space, and dignity. The next day, she arranged grooming and clean clothes, but rushed nothing. When Nathaniel saw his reflection after the transformation, he barely recognized the sharp-eyed man staring back. Eleanor watched, understanding that restoration was emotional before it was physical. That evening, she introduced him to Lily. The child studied him carefully before offering her favorite toy. Nathaniel's composure broke. He hadn't held anything precious in years. Eleanor saw then that this man wasn't broken beyond repair. He was buried beneath grief, and she knew she had made the right choice. As days passed, Nathaniel began to open up, He spoke of his past slowly, revealing his career, his family, and the crash that erased them. Eleanor shared her own losses, how success had come at the price of emotional isolation. They didn't rush romance. Instead, they built trust through conversation, routine, and shared silence. Lily grew comfortable around him, drawn to his calm presence. Eleanor realized something unsettling. Nathaniel understood her company's systems better than most of her executives. When she showed him internal data challenges, he offered solutions effortlessly. What began as curiosity became conviction. Eleanor didn't just want him beside her. She needed him in her world. Eleanor offered Nathaniel a role at Whitmore Analytics as head of data intelligence. The board resisted fiercely, citing optics and risk. Eleanor overruled them. Nathaniel doubted himself at first, fearing his mind had dulled. But within weeks, his brilliance resurfaced. He identified inefficiencies that saved millions and created models that redefined company strategy. Skeptics fell silent. Working together deepened their bond. Nathaniel admired Eleanor's strength beyond wealth. Eleanor admired his integrity beyond tragedy. Love grew quietly, steadily, rooted in respect rather than dependency. For the first time since their losses, both fell whole. Months later, Nathaniel took Eleanor back to the same supermarket. He knelt properly, with a ring he had chosen himself, and proposed with dignity and gratitude. Eleanor said yes without hesitation. Their wedding was grand yet deeply emotional, a symbol of redemption rather than spectacle. Lily walked between them, holding both their hands. The world saw a billionaire marrying a former homeless man. What they didn't see was two survivors choosing life again. Years passed. Eleanor and Nathaniel welcomed a son. Lily grew into a compassionate, brilliant young woman who later pursued medicine. Whitmore Analytics expanded across Europe and Africa, transforming industries and communities. Nathaniel and Eleanor led together, balancing innovation with humanity. Remembering his past, Nathaniel proposed creating a foundation dedicated to finding forgotten people, those abandoned by systems, and restoring them through skills and opportunity. Eleanor agreed without hesitation. In their later years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Eleanor and Nathaniel often revisited the memory of the pavement outside the supermarket. Their granddaughter once drew a picture of a woman kneeling before a man and wrote beneath it, "Love began where pride ended." Eleanor smiled, realizing that the greatest legacy she built wasn't her company. It was a life she chose when logic stepped aside for courage. Success did not soften Eleanor and Nathaniel. It refined them. As Whitmore Analytics expanded into new territories, including emerging markets across Africa and Eastern Europe, Eleanor found herself facing challenges no algorithm could solve: cultural resistance, ethical dilemmas, and political pressure. Nathaniel became her anchor in those moments, reminding her that data, without humanity, was just noise. He approached problems differently now, not as puzzles to dominate, but as systems to heal. Employees noticed a shift. The company culture transformed from ruthless efficiency to purposeful innovation, and loyalty replaced fear in the halls of power. At home, their children flourished in an atmosphere of honesty and emotional safety. Lily, now a teenager, spoke openly about her ambitions and fears, while their son grew up knowing stories of resilience rather than privilege. Eleanor often watched Nathaniel with the children and marveled at the quiet miracle of restoration. The man who once believed survival was a punishment had become the emotional center of their family. Love, she realized, was not loud, it was consistent. Despite public admiration, shadows from the past occasionally resurfaced. Nathaniel struggled with survivor's guilt, especially during moments of joy that felt undeserved. There were nights he woke from dreams of fire and falling metal, his breath shallow, his body tense. Eleanor never tried to fix him. She listened. She held him. She reminded him that grief did not disqualify him from happiness. Their marriage deepened not through perfection, but through patience. Eleanor, too, confronted her own scars. She had spent so long controlling outcomes that vulnerability felt dangerous. Letting go, trusting Nathaniel fully, delegating power, allowing herself to rest, was harder than building a billion-pound empire. But slowly she learned. Love did not weaken her leadership. It strengthened it. For the first time, her success felt shared, not isolating. The idea for the foundation was born quietly. Nathaniel noticed how often brilliant minds were lost not because of lack of ability, but lack of opportunity. People dismissed as broken, forgotten, or invisible. Eleanor understood immediately. They established the Brooks Whitmore Foundation with a mission to identify displaced individuals, the homeless, orphans, and abandoned youth, and provide education, mentorship, and employment pathways. It wasn't charity. It was restoration. The first success stories spread quickly. Former street dwellers became software testers, analysts, and engineers. Orphans became scholars and entrepreneurs. The foundation didn't just change lives. It reshaped narratives. Eleanor and Nathaniel insisted on one rule: dignity first. No cameras. No pity. Just belief. Watching others rise from ashes reminded Nathaniel daily that his own survival had purpose. As years unfolded, Lily left for medical school, driven by a desire to heal bodies the way her parents healed systems and lives. Their son followed a quieter path, drawn to teaching and philosophy. Eleanor watched her children step into the world with confidence not rooted in wealth, but in values. She knew then that legacy wasn't about inheritance. It was about example. Whitmore Analytics reached unprecedented heights, but Eleanor gradually stepped back from day-to-day leadership. Nathaniel took on a larger role, guiding strategy with calm authority. The board trusted him completely now. The same world that once stepped over him now sought his counsel. And yet, he never forgot the pavement, the cold nights, or the silence of being unseen. Time softened their pace, but not their purpose. Eleanor and Nathaniel traveled more slowly now, favoring quiet mornings over boardrooms. They revisited the supermarket one afternoon, standing across the street where everything had begun. There was no ceremony, no crowd, just two people holding hands, aware of how thin the line between despair and destiny could be. Eleanor admitted that asking him to marry her had been the most irrational decision of her life. Nathaniel smiled and told her it had been the first moment he believed the world hadn't given up on him. They laughed, not with irony, but with gratitude. Illness came gently, as it often does with age. Eleanor faced it with the same courage she had lived with, surrounded by family and peace. Nathaniel stayed by her side, reading to her, holding her hand, reminding her of everything she had built, not just companies, but lives. When she passed, the world mourned a visionary. Nathaniel mourned a woman who had knelt on concrete for him without pride. He carried on her work quietly, faithfully. The foundation expanded globally. Whitmore Analytics continued ethically, guided by principles Eleanor had embedded long before she left. Love, Nathaniel learned, did not end with loss. It transformed into responsibility. In his later years, Nathaniel spent more time with his grandchildren, telling them stories not of wealth, but choices. He taught them that brilliance meant nothing without compassion, and that pride was the enemy of connection. One afternoon, his youngest granddaughter brought him a drawing. It showed a woman kneeling before a man on a pavement, surrounded by light. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Love began where pride ended." Nathaniel closed his eyes, smiling through tears. The journey that began with nothing had become everything, not because of money, power, or recognition, but because two people chose belief over fear. And that choice echoed through generations, long after the world forgot where it all began. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.